Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us for our presentation in the second week of our Winter 2023 FCI Live series. Tonight, we have Rethinking Market Studies, which is going to be a conversation with Angela Sales from Little Africa Food Co-op, who was lead researcher on this project, and Dr. Jasmine Jackson, the co-director of the National Black Food and Justice Alliance. They're going to be sharing with us a research project that they've been doing about how market studies work and if they're working for Black-led food co-op communities and what changes may or may not be needed. So with that, I'm going to turn the floor over to them after just saying thank you so much for being here, Angela, and so much for being here, Dr. Jazz.
Yes. Thanks so much, y'all, for having us. Thanks so much for the invitation, JQ. Thanks so much to Angela for leading the research on this project. And thanks so much for I see some of the Alliance members in the audience for being here to support and those that are interested in what we have to say. So thanks everybody for showing up. Dr. Jazz Jackson with the Alliance, born, bred, and based in New Orleans. And I'll kick it to Angela to introduce
Greetings,
yourself.
everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm Angela Sales, located here in Cleveland, Ohio, representing the Little Africa Food Co-op proudly. And it's been an honor to do this research. So we're very excited to share it with you all this evening. And shout out to the Alliance for the incredible work that we're doing, because I'm part of the Alliance, but they've been around much longer than us as individuals, but collectively we're doing it together. And thank you, JQ, for the FCI Series Live invitation in this platform. So let's get right into it.
Yes, let's get into it. With the slide, I want to start sharing about why we're doing this project. Oh, actually, maybe I'll start telling you what we're going to do. Our overview, I'll definitely tell you why we're doing this project. We'll share some about the research methodology, like what we actually did to get this research. Angela will definitely dig into the review of the report, listening to all the Black voices that we've heard, and then sharing some insights and recommendations from our partners, researchers as well. And then, of course, we'll leave some good time for some juicy Q&A discussion. As JQ mentioned, this is our first public platform that we're sharing this research, y'all. So excited for y'all to be here for it. So, right. Why are we doing this? We know that this is actually not just us. This is a continuation of many conversations within the Black-led co-op space. Most recently, if you got to come to the 2022 Up and Coming conference, we had a great session in the Black-led track where we discussed the need for some culturally relevant market study principles and practices that actually highlighted and aided Black co-ops in Black neighborhoods to obtain Black funding. And not just Black funding, but all funding for Black people. But wanting to have this market study field that lies on the data, we had some goals that we wanted to actually shift. Hopefully, understanding the practices with market studies, but wanted to collect some information to see where institutions are using market studies and how they're actually interpreting the data. We wanted to develop some principles that are really relevant to our Black cooperatives, that we don't feel that we get those necessary demographics when we use the typical market study process. So there are a few more goals where we're shifting, hopefully, the philanthropy organizations towards financing more Black co-ops, and then also developing a short-term and long-term strategy where we're inviting others in our focus groups to actually lay that out for us. And then alternative funding and lending options, things that we haven't been tapping into before, like some health initiatives and also local funding. So some of those are our project goals, but we're really excited to be leading this. We've done so many interviews so far. Specifically, Angela and Michael Easterlin have been leading on conducting over 25 interviews. We've had a focus group that's met over 5 times so far. And those are from Black cooperatives throughout the United States. Throughout this research project, we've asked over 38 questions. They've all been qualitative, and Angela has meticulously dug into that data and got some great recommendations. So it's 30 pages of a full report that we will be sharing sometime in February. So please be on the lookout for that. But we'll share more in a second about what you can know. So we have some questions, just a few. So I mentioned there's about 38 questions. We only share and highlight about 5 of them from our cooperators, as we ask people from Black co-op co-ops that are actually building and may have already opened, but we also asked some questions of our stakeholders and partners, and we'll share a few results from that. And then we'll share some recommendations that we found that were really helpful, and I think that everyone can benefit learning from. And then those standout points, so it was like, wow, I didn't know that we find this out doing this research. So I'm going to turn it over to Angela, as she has lots to share with you all.
Thank you, Dr. Jazz. So our report basically breaks down into 4 sections. Section 1 highlights the questions and responses from our cooperators. Section 2 provides the interview questions and responses from our funders and other stakeholders. Section 3 of the report actually details information that we were able to gather on the processes of market research. And Section 4 is the fun part, where we introduce principles, insights, strategies, and recommendations. And of course, anytime you're doing research, further questions arise. And so we also share those in our concluding section. So as Dr. Jazz mentioned, we extracted 10 key questions. And so we're going to go through them now, some that we thought will be most impactful to share with you all. So we asked our cooperators, have they participated in a market study before? 55% responded yes, and 45% responded no or not yet. But of those responding no, more than 80% do plan to have a market study done. We asked, what were the results of the market study, what you expected? And the overwhelming consensus is that the data collection based solely on quantitative determinants really misses the mark in assessing the needs of residents in Black communities. In response to expectations of the market study results, the cooperators responded yes, some said no, and others had mixed expectations. And so in the report, you will find direct and paraphrase responses highlighted in Black. And I will share a few of the responses here. One said no, the results said they shouldn't open a co-op. They haven't seen a market study that shows Black co-ops being successful. The study was not particularly accurate. The process was not totally transparent, and the researcher displayed inherent bias during discussions. Others said yes, the information was good, and it included all the grocery stores within a 10 to 20 mile radius and average spend data. However, it was missing spending and buying power of Black communities specifically. We asked what could have been different about the process. And our respondents said that the research should give credibility to those that live in community, because currently it excludes the knowledge of the residents and neighbors that live there. That the research should include critical race analysis and impacts, because currently it does not consider social determinants other than economical. They responded that the research methods lack transparency. One co-op did not know what they were being compared against due to the proprietary nature of the database that was being used. They also shared that they think research should engage more co-ops for information sharing in this space so that we're able to learn from those that have already been doing it, and that the researchers should facilitate group learning and education of the market study results and share the key learnings with the cooperators in the community. We asked cooperators what criteria are they using to field or look for market researchers. They responded that researchers need to understand that many people in Black communities share a level of apprehension that information obtained by outsiders may ultimately be used against their businesses, community, or even them personally. There was a statement that market studies are being used for gentrification. The 2 overarching points of consensus on preferred search criteria emerged. Number 1, researchers should be from the culture, having experience-based familiarity with the culture, be culturally competent, emotionally intelligent, and culturally proficient. And number 2, that researchers should have experience-based backgrounds that include challenges and struggles and issues faced in the Black community food space. We asked the heart of the question: how do you see market studies moving forward in the future to be more culturally relevant? And this is the section where there was a lot of insights gained from our cooperators. So customer experience is one of the areas that our cooperators felt should include in voices of the people who are directly impacted, especially in neighborhoods where there currently isn't a grocery store. There's a need to have more involvement at the local level and also have the voice of the community better reflected. Also, studies should answer the question: how can we collect data on specific products that people want? Our cooperators want potential inventory data that is specific to our geographic location and tastes and preferences of the Black diaspora. The consideration of other programs or services that are not being offered at the grocery store that can be offered by the co-op should be included, and that comes through supplemental programs and services. They said the study should assess environmental justice factors so that we could use the studies to advocate for policies in our communities. Black worldview and culture. Market studies reinforce Black redlining. So this tool should do just the opposite, was the reflection of our cooperators. The study should have a strong reflection of our own culture, including the aesthetic design, the products, and the marketing flavor. When choosing the comparative trade areas, it makes sense for the co-ops to be involved on some level. And so co-op involvement and contributions was another area where cooperators said that studies can be more relevant in the future. A greater focus on operational data will be informative as it relates to product selection, and it would be helpful to make mission versus margins a part of the regular conversation. And you will read more insights on that in the report. Owning our data. While many of the conversations focus on the need for sensitivity and experience and working within Black communities, there was also considerable conversation about the need to generate our own data. A few of the respondents specifically raised the issue of creating an infrastructure for collecting data. If we own it, we can shape the data. Many of the conversations were focused on our collective relationship with food within the food system. The idea of healthy eating as a luxury was raised, as was the opportunity to better market healthy food in our communities. Social determinants of health were specifically mentioned as data points that could be included in the assessment of market potential. Someone flat out said, make a new template and a new tool because the current yardstick just doesn't measure. Somebody has to figure out how to measure something more effective and more relevant. The current market study tools do not correlate well for Black communities. There is so much more to figuring out the probability of success than profit margins. Currently, the decisions to fund are driven by capitalist structures, and studies should include and emphasize worker and member well-being as a measure of success. And finally, the more that co-op managers and operators understand data, the more they can participate in directing the approach. So there was a strong emphasis that cooperators would love to see us have a better understanding of what these tools can do and how we can use them more effectively. That's the education. Next section asks questions from our funders and other stakeholders. We asked, does your organization have a cultural diversity department? 100% of the respondents answered no, there is no cultural diversity department. However, many of them have boards that have diversity initiatives, and some have special committees. We asked, what is your organization's commitment to racial equity? And do you have a formal equity position statement? This question was asked to interviewers of 8 organizations. Only 2 has an actual position statement on racial equity. In general, conversations and small steps are happening, but more can be done to formalize equity position statements. We asked, does your organization recognize or acknowledge historic lack of support of Black-led initiatives? Most respondents answered yes. Some with their staffs and boards are really just now coming into alignment around historical and structural inequities. Someone said it happens often in conversations about the work in planning and on the board. One important question came up to organizations around how do they validate market studies. We only had one respondent confirm any market study validation activities. Their method is to analyze and ask probing questions and talk through the results of the study. The others do not have a mechanism nor formal validation process for validating these studies. At the most, they will ask clarifying questions and may solicit some insights from the local community, but there is an obvious gap pertaining to qualitative data validation. When it comes to funding, we did ask how many Black-led co-ops have your organization funded, and many of them did not have direct statistics. They, have some small percentages, but based on our interviews, the Collective Courage Fund leads the funding community with funding for 10 Black-led co-ops over the past 2 years. Of those funded, 6 are grocery co-ops, 1 real estate co-op, and 1 food and land co-op. Section 3 is what we discovered about the market study research process, and we will have you review those details in the report because we want to focus on the fun part, which is Section 4, the principles, insights, strategies, and recommendations. So I've lifted just a few of those to share today. So some of the principles that emerged were the need to have a better understanding of how this work relates back to historical cooperative models. Co-ops have been directly associated with political and economic advancement throughout the post-slavery history of Blacks in America. The history of how our co-ops worked was and must continue to be recognized as fundamental knowledge for planners, researchers, and operators of future cooperatives. Education from those that look, sound, and talk like the members should be part of the business model. That was a resounding message that came through. We must have a clear and collective understanding of what these tools do and how they work. The feasibility study, the market study, the surveys, and that goes back to the education needed to understand the impact and usage of the market studies. And others said that people should be paid for their participation because that is sometimes an obstacle when getting participation for the studies. In terms of insight, I lifted this out of a few. One of our interviewers said that market study metrics are remarkably racist and are not the greatest predictors of success. The amount that whiteness plays a role is used to determine possible or potential or future success. And those metrics basically ask, are you rich enough? Are you white enough? Did you go to college? And what they meant by that is the income, education, and, white collar job do you have types of questions that, get thrown into demographics of the census tract. And so that was very insightful. So I want to get to the recommendations, of which I was told to share only 5. And so I did list them here, but I will only elaborate on a few. So one of the recommendations was around developing new tools, templates, and metrics. And our interviewers came up with some very great recommendations. One is the plug and play template, which was something that was suggested to be a tool for market studies similar to a business plan template. And it can be an educational tool to be used as an outline and framework. It was also suggested that we map out Black cooperatives for a support network. The sentiment is that we can only survive if we work with each other, particularly starting from a place of being underserviced. One of the popular recommendations was around creating a mobile app for digital receipt collection, because market studies takes a look at sales data. And so one of the solutions put forth was that we collect our own data by capturing the data from how we're spending, and that we utilize technology to be able to do that. Another recommendation is that we basically create new data elements with the intent on supporting local food systems, farmers, artisans into the overall model. We talked about building collective education and understanding. It was also suggested to build a mechanism for feedback to help unclog blockages in the leadership. Building a cohort of data research talent and capacity so that we have more options in the data research field. One of the other recommendations that really resonated was creating a public conversation around this topic by writing and submitting and publishing articles. And we're thankful again to FCI for being our first public conversation around this. Sometimes public discourse gets people in power to behave differently. And some of the other recommendations is that we should consider the Alliance, the National Black Food and Justice Alliance, to perform the market research. And another one is that when we're looking at our data methodology, that we look to build a hybrid between analog and gravity-fed data. And the report goes into more details in terms of what those terminology means, and you'll be able to see those there. So yes, this is the meat of what we would like to present, and we are now at our Q&A portion, and we can open for discussion. We wanted to make sure that we, gave space and time so that we can kind of talk through. I hope I didn't talk too fast, and that you were able to grasp some of the key highlights. All right, so I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Jazz to facilitate our Q&A.
Yeah, thank you so much, Angela. I'm like, I saw this presentation. I'm seeing it again. I'm still holding my breath. Like, wow, so much gratitude for, just putting in the work and being sure that we're on track to have this happen. We've called for it. And we know that right now, specifically how local food systems can create that community and economic development, specifically in Black communities that we deserve. So these market studies changing would be great to shift that philanthropic dollar for sure. I see a hand raised, but is there any questions in the chat? Feel free to drop them there. Not sure if I can pronounce. Is it Permel from Market 166?
That was perfect. Thank you. If there's a situation where the feasibility study, says kind of what you already mentioned, that the store will fill based on sales projections, where do you go from there? How do you start a capital campaign and solicit investors when they're going to say, well, did you do a pro forma feasibility? And I guess you have to say yes, and then say, but they said we would fill. So do you want to invest? So how do you handle all that?
Let me make sure I understood it. You're saying that if a market study predicts or says that you're going to fail, how do you take that to funders with that information?
Yes, that's right. So because the first thing, some corporation or grants or maybe just donors will say, have you done your feasibility study? You're going to say yes, and you have to say that it showed that we will not be financially feasible. And then it's kind of an awkward transition. After saying that, you say, so you ready to invest? So I don't know, where do you go from there? How do you use that?
Well, that's a great. Okay, I understand your question now. Thank you. That's an excellent question. And I think it gets to the heart of the matter, actually, because if you have a feasibility study that says your business is not feasible, then of course, any reasonable funder is not going to touch that. I think what this research helped to emerge is that this is more than just a regular capitalist structure of a business. It's a cooperative movement. And that the fact that we are cooperating that profitability versus mission has to have some weight versus impact, and it has to have a balance. So some of our funders actually are starting to get it, and some are more traditional. Some of the funders have programs where they do things such as, if a co-op in a community that may not be able to do a capital campaign in a Black community, it may not work as well as it does in a white community, perhaps because the capital is not available from your member owners, then what they do is actually create like a collateral pool for cooperators. And so that's where members of that particular financial institution, where they raise funds and put it in a pool and make that available to a co-op to be able to have some form or access of funding that can be used for their co-op. So that's one example. Another example is some of the funders that help fund startup co-ops, they actually do capacity building with startups and have their cooperators go through a program, and then, give them maybe a $50,000 grant after finishing the program. So, different funders that are co-op friendly tend to have more flexibility because they understand that some co-ops are not coming with the level of experience and business history, and that feeding the community is, the primary objective, and they're willing to help subsidize some of that. But on the flip side, the co-op is a business, and it should be a healthy business, and it should be sustainable. So that is the goal, to prepare and find creative ways so that the co-op is operational, but that we're also able to meet the need of the community that doesn't have access to the foods that we deserve and that we need. So I hope that answers your question a little bit. I don't know if Dr. Jazz would like to add anything.
I mean, honestly, thinking about just listening in on the interviews, a lot of the co-ops did receive market studies that said that they wouldn't start a co-op, but they're still starting one. So I don't know what that really says. Like, how do you take it to funders? You continue to tell that narrative and like understand that there are different ways that people are accessing food besides what's written in the census data or publicly available for purchase in information. So I feel just to keep exploring and figuring out how to actually tell the narrative of your members and community. But I'll go to the chat. Thank you so much for that question.
Dr. Jazz, I'm sorry, before you move on, I wanted to add something that I just remembered. There was an organization that has offered us as a group of Black cooperators to, if we come as a group of cooperators, that they're actually willing to serve as a pass-through for federal dollars to help our co-ops get funded. So there are, funders and funder intermediaries that are there willing to help us to get the funding that we need. So I did want to mention that.
Yeah, and specifically to one of the questions in this chat, to Bonnie and LA, who are these funders who do capacity building? We will definitely share a resource guide. So we're going to share the report, and we'll also share the things that we learned. Like, this is the website you can go to get this, or this is who's offering that. So all this will be coming in February. So I'll definitely say be on the lookout for that, Bonnie. We want to make sure we get the permission from these cooperators and people that we talk to be able to share this as well. We only named the Collective Courage Fund so far, since Angela and I both are participating, and shout out to Erin on the call as well. But wanted to specifically highlight someone that's actually being forward and progressive in funding Black cooperatives. But we haven't named anyone else specifically in the report until we're getting explicit permission. Besides that, there was another question in the chat about the plans for sharing the report with the community. And I mentioned to Ron that This is our first public platform. We will be presenting, or actually having it public, with the Alliance's annual report. February is our Founders Month, Black History Month. We want to make sure you get all the good things in February. So you will be getting this full report. And if you have any opportunities that this should be a continued public conversation, don't hesitate to reach out to myself or Angela to invite us to continue to keep it up. There was another question from Melody at North End Co-op. Have you created a pool of market study and feasibility study agencies that work well with Black co-ops? And I think that kind of answers Sabani's question about how we will have that resource guide, the things that we learned. So we have some recommendations for sure of our next steps, but next steps for people who are reading the report. Like if you need money right now, if you need to change your market study report around right now, these are some ways that we, have found that could be helpful. Another question was from Ron Hance. Do we plan on continuing the survey annually or biannually? I'll give it to Angela to say where we are headed with our next steps. I don't know about a reoccurring, but let me see how you're feeling, Angela.
Well, I think this first phase of creating a baseline, more or less, of what the current situation is critical to determining our next steps. I also think that this report can absolutely serve as a pivot to what's happening to move market studies and the relationship with funders into a more positive direction. It may behoove us to look at, next year to see what progress we made. I mean, a longitudinal study, will help us to benchmark it. And if that's initiative that the Alliance is willing to, continue to host so that we can have a checkup or, be able to maybe create a report card or whatever that looks like, is still kind of in the development phases. But I mean, I'm willing to, to continue to participate because I of course have a personal interest in our co-op here in Cleveland, but also as a cooperator plugged into the national, Black Co-op Developers Network. We want to see all of our co-ops thriving because we put this in as a labor of love. Most of us do this as a labor of love. And so we really mean it. So, I'm just saying that I'm all for it, as long as, we do it as a team.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm echoing that. This is setting the baseline. We are setting some strategy. And I would like to check in to see, if market studies are being performed that are meeting the needs of our co-ops in the future. So who knows, Ryan, if it'll be next year, the year after, or once we do get some things cultivated. So I want to move to the next question about how are we cultivating? I'm moving all in the chat. I want to actually, before I go to that, back to Bonnie about the civic engagement, want to invite you. You're already a part of the Alliance's co-op calls, but in our third quarter of the year, the Collective Courage Fund will actually be leading a civic engagement activity in ways that they're going to dig into what that means for co-ops and how you can tap into it, even if you aren't already there. So I hope you continue to join us and can learn more. And that's to all Black cooperators. In case you want to know more about the Alliance's co-op call, you don't have to be a member. It is an open space for Black cooperators to come. We meet regularly monthly on the fourth Tuesday of the month at 6 p.m. Eastern. So reach out if you want to know more. But back to Bonnie for this next question about being cultivated. How are these new market analysts who take this information into account being cultivated? We've only talked to one directly market study researcher, and that researcher did say that they were interested in actually using some metrics or ways that we want to collect data and making some type of hybrid situation of their research. So I think we're already approaching people who are doing market studies, but we're also looking to see how, in our own community, what does these skills look like? How can we train people? What's needed to have market researchers? So we, as the Alliance, have just partnered with FAMU in Florida with our Center for Agroecology, and that's led by our Black academics arm, where we're hoping to continue to have that bucket of people there, but can make sure that they're learning the skills and we're broadening them out to not just the Alliance, but also other co-ops. So that's to be determined. So Bonnie, if you have any ideas, feel free to share them with us. But I'll go to Mark for the next question. I'll kick it to Angela with this one. What's the size, the square footage of the food co-op that's being considered reasonable, and how much money does it take to open?
Thank you, Mark, for that question. That varies from co-op to co-op. I know that a full size, co-op is around 10,000 square feet, but some of the recommendations are for smaller co-ops that could be as small as 3,000 square feet. And the way that they base the size consideration, which is where the market study becomes relevant, because they measure what is called the retail spend per square foot. And so based on how other grocery stores or other co-ops are performing with their sales, right? If you have a co-op down the street that's 10,000 square foot and, they're making, I don't know, $1 per, square foot, every month, when the market study comes to look at your potential location or your potential size, they're going to compare the demographics and the sales of that store with the sales and demographics of your store. And if that store has a high income, then that may not translate well to yours, where theirs may be $1 per square foot. They may say you'll make 50 cents per square foot. So 10,000 square foot is too big for you. You should reduce it down to 5,000 square foot. So, a lot of that size comparison is based on quantitative data. And it depends on how that reads. Now, it's up to your board and it's up to, you all as cooperators on if you want to move forward with those recommendations. And that's part of the decision-making that has to happen, because part of the research emerged what we know as the Black economy, that there's really more money in the Black community than is reported in the data. And so it's not really seen, but we know we spend it. And so I think that's one of the key insights that also emerged. And how do we count that money that, Susie is braiding hair in the basement, or Auntie Sally is baking cakes and selling food on, Fish Fridays, or whatever the case may be, that we know that there's other monies that don't emerge in the data. So it's kind of subjective. How much money does it take to open? It depends on the size of your co-op and what your offerings are. There are smaller co-ops that can be under $1 million. And then you have co-ops that are in the 7 million, 10 million, $12 million range. And so there's no hard and fast answer for that. That really just depends on what you want for your co-op to be. So hopefully that helps a little. I would advise that maybe you talk to co-ops that are already open and have already secured their funding, like Gem City Market in Dayton, or Detroit People's Food Co-op, even Flint. I believe they're opening, and they, may have some other insights for you in terms of what that looks like in real time.
Yes, the North Flint Food Market.
North Flint Food Market, yes.
Thank you for that insight, Angela. I don't have anything to add there. I'm going to go to the next question. They're rolling in. It's feeling good for these further in the conversation. Shout out to Mama Muja and Tuskegee wanting to open a co-op there, and says that she would love support to do a market study here. They need it desperately. I'm really interested to see what a market study would look like for Tuskegee, particularly being low population, low income, which would, I think serve very well without it having many food options. So Mama Musha, being a member of the Alliance, don't hesitate to reach out. That's part of our next step. Like, who's ready for our market study? And not saying that you're ready, but in the process, what does it look to get ready, and what does that support look like from our end? So I'm not gonna forget you said that. Don't forget to reach out.
All right. Ashe.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Absolutely.
Great.
Love to have a
Love
co-op.
what you're doing. Love what you're doing.
Yeah, we're here. We're doing this for each other. So
Yes.
we gotta get it
Yes.
done.
All right.
I'll send it to Cleveland. That's you, Angela. Should we focus on maintaining existing gardens as pilot co-ops?
Well, that didn't actually come up in our research, our market studies research. I think that for grocery retail co-ops, they may have connection with farming co-ops, or, other gardening. I think that the alliance is probably well situated to kind of inform how Black owned farmers and gardeners can be inputs into the Black cooperative retail grocery chain, and as part of the supply chain. I don't think that's well defined or developed yet. I think that's a next phase of us organizing. But if your co-op is wanting to procure fresh produce from your local food systems, then maintaining a garden that can source that can be an amazing idea. So that's
I'll just add maintaining relationships. Honestly, that's what we need to do. It's if it's a garden, if it's a farm, if it's a person who needs a co-op, and it would be about helping you build it. I think that's was the part of maintaining. But pilot co-ops, I think piloting a retail store would look like a buyer's club more so than just a community garden. Like having some type of like CSA or something from that community garden would be like some type of pilot, what I would see. But excited that Cleveland's continuing the wave of co-ops. Thanks, Amanda, for the analysis advancing co-op development efforts in a very meaningful way. So shout out to you, Angela, Michael, and even some participants are on the call. I saw Sister Free's comments earlier. Also,
peace, everyone. Peace. This was excellent. Excellent.
hey, Sister Free, thanks so much for being part of our focus groups and helping curate these questions. And also we'll be help curating the strategy for our next steps. So shout out to it's teamwork, make the dream work. Yes, someone in Phoenix saying that they have a market study that they are, anticipating to look bad on the surface because of these issues, but I'm thankful for these tools to be effective, to be sharing. So,
Can I make a comment right there, Dr. Jazz?
absolutely.
I just had a thought about some of our cooperators did their market study more than once. Some did it twice, some did it 3 times. And even after in certain phases, sometimes they have to be refreshed. So, to your point, your first market study may not be your last market study because the data from 2 years ago, it's old, it gets old. And so by the time you're actually prepared to go and use that market study, you may have to do it again. So that's fine that you have to change it if it's not atypical. Okay, thank you.
No, thank you. I think that was the last question as well.
Okay.
They've just been commenting some. So I saw Bonnie put in, I'm not sure yet. Flint looks like about 9, and Detroit may have been even more, like 19 million. And you said y'all are looking at 7 million, Bonnie. Yeah. Okay, good. And the Alliance will be accepting new members, hopefully by our annual meeting at the end of March. We haven't set a date just yet as we're still trying to fine tune the internal processes. It would be nice to have a set date to share with everybody, but I'm saying hopefully by our annual meeting at the end of March, but I definitely will keep you posted. And for anyone who's interested, you can always fill out or email us at membership@blackfoodjustice.org. Thank you, JQ, for putting that in the chat. Or you can visit our website, and under the membership tab, there is a drop-down menu where you can fill out a info form, and one of our organizers will be in touch about a one-on-one and just letting you know where we are in the process as they are taking the lead on reforming our membership to make sure we're serving all of our current members before expanding. Yeah. Are there more questions for the Q&A? This has been really good, and generative has got my wheels turning so much. I was like, oh yeah, that was in the recommendations. I forgot to follow up about that app. Like, people are doing receipt drives and want to have it like in an aggregated place. So when we're not just looking at census data, we can actually look at like Black data, how much people are spending on produce and how far away they're traveling and how often they're purchasing. So all those things, we're definitely looking to continue to cultivate some data on. All right, well, maybe not hearing it anymore. I might kick it back to you, JQ or Angela, if you have any closing words. Actually, never mind. We got one in the chat. Speaking of old data and outdated models, did COVID pandemic impact inform the need for a new model as people habits, movements, and emotional states change? I think COVID highlighted the need for our local and regional food systems in a way that people were like, oh yeah, we don't need to ship it across the globe and whatnot. I think that was mainly one of the things that I feel like progressed with the pandemic. But also just knowing that co-ops have been a solution. Like, I think it's like becoming the wave, but as Angela mentioned, like the history of co-ops are Black. Like, we've done this for centuries, and knowing that the way that we can exchange goods and services in a non-extractive way are the things that help create our community. But I'll kick it to Angela. Do you feel about the COVID pandemic impacts?
For sure. One impact of COVID on the model that really emerged from COVID is that people want hand-to-door delivery of their groceries. And so the delivery model seems to really have to be a necessary part of your business model in order for your business to be sustainable, because it became convenient. And of course, we see changing trends in the grocery industry in general with things like Instacart and, the Amazon, with the Whole Foods, where you can just go online, order your groceries, and then they show up at your door. And I think COVID also did that, because a lot of programming dollars went to bringing food to the most vulnerable of us during that particular time. And so it really showed and illustrated that as cooperators, we need to look at how we can service that particular demographic. Of course, some people want to come out and get fresh air and shop, but just the whole trend is toward, convenience. And so I think COVID actually helped to highlight that trend as well. So consider that as you move forward, with your business modeling for the co-op.
Absolutely. This has been so generative. Like, the whole point of our research is to make sure that we have more Black co-ops, like, honestly, to highlight that, we are underfunded, like, historically, drastically. And the market studies have been a tool that have hindered, additional funding to be coming our way. So we want to make sure that they're accurately reflecting our communities, which is why we're calling for some more culturally relevant practices and principles. So I do hope that you anticipate the report as much as we anticipate sharing it with you all. It is so juicy. You will have it to share with funders, with your community, with your board, with your potential members. Like, it's gonna be good, y'all. So yeah, once again, shout out to Angela for the heavy lift. Honestly, could not have done this without you by any means. Shout out to all of the people who participate in the focus groups. Shout out to JQ for having us on this public platform, for just even considering that this would be a project that you'd be interested in as well. So I'm also just overall grateful. Yeah, Angela, anything else?
Well, I just, reading through when you do receive the report, you'll see some certain quotes and italics that I've kind of just placed in the middle of the report that I thought were very provocative, very deep, insightful things. And so there's, some of that in the report. And I will also want to say that I'm very proud of the minds of our people to come up with innovation and to actually come up with solutions. We are brilliant when it comes to problem solving. And I, have just been that's been illustrated through the process of doing the interviews and collating our collective thought. Like, we can cooperate. Somebody said, what can we do? And it was 2 words, just cooperate. Like, how can we share human resources? How can we as cooperators share money? How can we share knowledge? A lot of our emphasis is going to extractive forces, or systems to try to find a solution where we can, turn inward and actually rely on one another more and also build. And so I think there's a balance between us actually practicing being cooperative, the cooperative principles, one with another, as well as trying to change the current systems that are in place. And so I think that is a thought that I would like to leave everyone with. Thank you.
I want to thank Angela and Dr. Jazz for trusting us to share this research for the first time ever in public with all of us. It was just really powerful to have that trust and to have you guys share this here. Thank you so much for all your time and efforts. I want to real quick get you guys what's coming up next, and then if anyone wants to stick around and chat some more, Angela and Dr. Jazz have agreed that they can stay a little bit and have a little more informal conversation with people when the recording's finished. So we just want to once again thank Angela and Dr. Jazz for being here today, and the National Black Food and Justice Alliance for leading this work. Deeply appreciate that you're here sharing with us today. We have coming up a whole bunch of stuff the rest of this week. This is our busier of the 2 weeks. Don't miss it. Tomorrow, navigating partnerships and power dynamics. This is with 7 Roots, but they're talking about specifically, a lot of us now are working with a nonprofit who's maybe launching our co-op or is partnering with us, cities, counties that are funding our cooperatives. We're getting into dynamic partnership relationships to start these co-ops, and that just brings up different power dynamics. And actually, they're going to have with them I'm missing the name, but the project manager from Northside Food Co-op is going to be here with us talking about they're navigating this right now, working with a nonprofit arm, working with their county, and how you navigate those relationships and what they're running into. So it's going to be a really great conversation. And then we have tomorrow night the most fun member input process ever. Miriam Gee will be joining us from Co-Everything. It is an architecture and design firm that goes far beyond your traditional design firm. They do a lot of input processes, and they ran a whole public input process with the Dorchester food co-ops in a community that is predominantly non-white, a lot of immigrant communities, a lot of Black community, Latinx. They ran an input process to say, what do you want this store to look like now that we're here? They're going to show you some of the steps they took to run that process and how you can adapt them to getting input, dynamic, meaningful input with your members and owners from your food co-op. And then, are you capital campaign ready? For those of you who will be running capital campaigns, the Katie Novak from Katie Novak Cooperative Coaching will be here with us Wednesday. We have a lot more great conversations coming up about gentrification and food co-ops. We have Anthony Goodwin coming from National Cooperative Grocers talking about food justice and the food co-op movement. All sorts of great stuff all the way through Thursday night. We hope you'll join us. And real quick, we couldn't be here tonight if it wasn't for the financial support of the USDA, National Cooperative Bank, National Cooperative Grocers, and CoBank. We're so grateful to them. Thanks so much. And we are